With me this morning, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Alan Tudge. Mr Tudge, thanks very much for your time. I guess in the context of the Prime Minister's comments this morning, I want to ask you about those focus groups that Fairfax is reporting. Mark Kenny in the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald today saying that essentially the focus groups came up with a response that they feel the Prime Minister and Treasurer had learnt their lesson from last year to this. Is that a fair way to characterise it, do you think?
Kieran, I had a close look at that article today, and it was welcome news in some respects that people were responding positively to our budget. The budget, as you know, was focused on families or focused on small business and boosting jobs and confidence, and that's exactly what it appears to be doing. The most interesting figure, actually, out of Mark Kenny's article was the reporting of the ANZ business confidence data, and it showed that business confidence is up 5.4% over the last 2 weeks, 3.6% since the budget alone. And as the ANZ chief economist himself said, this is great for the economic outlook and really adds to the other positive economic indicators which are out there, such as record home approvals, such as jobs growth, such as small business creation and new business creation. So everything that we're doing, including this budget, is about strengthening the economy, because with a strong economy, you have more jobs and you have more wealth.
But Alan Tudge, do you fear that the electorate no longer has stomach for reform, that that the years of the Howard government, particularly of the boom times, has meant that the people aren't willing to take a hit, which is obviously going to be necessary if the budget is going to be put back into a structural surplus?
Certainly reform is difficult at the best of times, and it's particularly difficult when the revenues are down as they are at the moment. But at the same time, we've got a number of structural measures which have been put in place, and most importantly is showing a very clear path back to surplus. So, for example, where we inherited $50 budget deficits, we're now showing a pathway down to $35 billion next year, all the way down to $7 billion and declining thereafter. So getting very close to surplus within 4 or 5 years. That's what we need to focus on. We still need to contain the expenditure, which is what we're doing. Expenditure is now only increasing by about 1 to 1.5% per annum, so that we can have we can be optimistic that we're getting absolutely back on top of the public finances after the disastrous Labor years.
Mr Bowen, the Shadow Treasurer today, is going to say that if the government wants an election on superannuation, then bring it on. He's saying that this is a growing expenditure that's going to outstrip the pension spend, the tax treatment of superannuation, and he's going to take the government head on when it comes to this. He's addressing the press club today.
Kieran, this is one of the key differences between the Labor Party and the coalition, is that the Labor Party look at people's superannuation nest eggs and all they see is a bucket of money which they can tax, whereas we see that as individuals' hard-earned dollars which they have set aside for their retirement. So we don't plan on taxing superannuation any more than it is ordinarily taxed, because it is their money and it is there to support their retirement. What we want to do is bring the overall expenditure down across the economy so that we can show a very clear pathway, as we are doing, to get back to budget surplus. Secondly, we want to be able to boost overall business confidence, as we are doing, so that businesses can go out there and invest, so that they can create jobs and they can increase wages. That's what the Australian people want the Australian government to do, and that's exactly what we're about.
National Seniors, though, the National Seniors group supports Labor in this in their view, that superannuation needs to be looked at as well. They've accused the government of simply taking the low-hanging fruit of the part pension without looking at the tax treatment of those with millions of dollars in their superannuation nest eggs.
But they're two different things, Kieran. The pension, if you like, is a welfare safety net for those who don't have adequate retirement incomes. We always want that pension to be generous, to be sustainable, ongoing, and our reforms are aimed at doing exactly that. The superannuation, on the other hand, is not a welfare payment. That's individuals' own money which they have set aside. And so they should have as much of that money as possible. And as long as, and while that superannuation nest egg is growing, it means that they won't be relying upon the pension in the future. So we're absolutely determined to protect the superannuation pool from Labor's attempts to tax it more. We won't be tracking that, but what we will be doing is making sure that overall the budget is sustainable in the long term, so that we don't have to raise taxes like Labor is proposing to do.
Now, well, let's look at some other issues in the returning the returning jihadists or returning foreign fighters. One of 3 Australian men who went to Syria to fight with IS now says he never took part in any combat and wanted to serve only as part of a humanitarian aid mission. Does the government need to show some willingness to at least listen to the case of these individuals before saying that they're going to imprison them?
Kieran, the first thing that I would say is that nobody should be leaving the country to go and fight or work with ISIS under any circumstances. They should not be doing that. If they do, then we will have very little sympathy for them when they return. In fact, when they do return, they will be arrested at the airport, they will be charged, and most likely they will be imprisoned. Of course, when they are charged, they will have the ability to present their cases to exactly what they're doing. However, we have no sympathy for them. Don't go in the first place. If you return, you will be charged. You will likely be imprisoned, because we don't want you participating and working with the evil death cult in Syria and elsewhere.
But what about the scope here for these individuals to help in stopping radicalisation in the first place, to bring their stories to younger people who might be susceptible to this?
Kieran, I don't support that. We want to send a very, very clear message to people. Don't go abroad to fight with ISIS. Do not do that to start with. If you do that and you are lucky enough to survive because you're not beheaded or killed while you're over there, you will be arrested when you return. That's our very clear message. Don't go. If you come back, you will be arrested, you will be charged, and you'll most likely be imprisoned.
Australia's, let's look at some other issues now. And the live cattle trade caught in another controversy, this relating to the treatment of cattle in cattle exports to Vietnam. What's the government's reaction to these images, horrific images that have emerged?
Yeah, they are pretty horrific images. Already the Agriculture Department is investigating those, as they always do, and should those investigations show that that abattoir has been found in breach of our standards, then they will no longer be receiving animals. What we won't be doing, though, Kieran, is shutting down the live animal export industry off the back of such images. That's what the Labor Party did in the past. Now, the reason being that this is an important industry for Australia. It's an important food source for those destination countries. And additionally, should we shut down the live animal export industry, I actually don't think that would be in the interests of animal welfare practices globally either, because we're the only country out of 109 countries in the world that export animals that actually invest in the welfare practices at those destination countries. So should we withdraw from the market, as many are arguing we should, then it just means some other country will replace us and won't invest as much in animal welfare practices as we do.
And finally, Mr Tudge, this Senate inquiry into the treatment of asylum seekers on Nauru. Yesterday it was quite extraordinary, some pretty basic questions to those contractors of the detention centre, and they had to take everything on notice. They basically had very little information to give. Is that appropriate? Should they have at least been forthcoming to this parliamentary hearing yesterday?
I didn't see the evidence which they gave, although I have read some of the reports. I I think had the Senate inquiry, had they been serious about wanting a full suite of information, they would have also had the Department of Immigration provide evidence to the inquiry as well, which they didn't get. We're aware of some of the allegations which have been made at the detention centres in Nauru. We take every single allegation very seriously. We have absolutely no tolerance for criminal activity which is occurring. As you know, Kieran, we had a full independent review into the operations of the Nauru Detention Centre, the Moss Inquiry, and we're implementing all 19 of those recommendations.
Mr. Tudge, we're out of time. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Kieran.